Evening all, Rocky here again. Welcome to another Ramblings video. Today I'm going to talk about something I like a lot. Podcasts. I think podcasts are fantastic. Now obviously I'm preaching to the choir here because if you listen to this you know what a podcast is, but for off chance you don't, a podcast or internet radio show, that's probably the best way to describe a podcast. I think the term podcast comes from something to do with the iPod, and that is, it's to do with the iPod, but the term is now used to describe pretty much any sort of internet radio show that's distributed through, you know, iTunes or Slipsynth or any of the other dozens of ways to get them. So I've got a list here of the ones I like to listen to, and a sort of brief history of how I got into listening to podcasts. I think it starts way back in the mists of time before the term podcast existed. There was an internet radio show called The Pyro Pimps. A friend of mine and I used to listen to that a lot. It's like an internet gaming show, so that was pretty interesting. That was certainly my first exposure to podcasts. Then a few years later I got into the audio series called Deathlands, James Exler's Deathlands. That's a audiobooks designed for long distance lorry drivers in America. They're available as like CDs, fat tapes, books, also as audio files, and there's like 100 books or something ridiculous like that. And I listened to a lot of them at night, you know, just trying, you know, try to sleep. Just listen to something to make you sleep. So I used to pop one of them on, make me listen to that. That was used to send me off to sleep. My first sort of modern podcast exposure would be, well, these are in no particular order by the way. It's one called Newsreel. Sean Kennedy. Google him. In fact, Google Tales from the After now if you like sort of audio dramas, really well done, sort of cyberpunk, dystopian future audio drama. That's a brilliant series. Really listen to it, it's really good. And he does a weekly podcast, well at least a daily podcast at one point called Newsreel. Was he tackling the WOG? Global Separate for Technology, Technology Trends. It's good. It's about tech and shit that governments get up to. Very interesting. Very non-gaming. In fact, it's the only non-gaming podcast I still listen to. Basically, I'm just going to go down the list of podcasts I subscribe to. I download them on the old PC here, and you can sort of see that away, and also on my phone, so I can listen to them on the go. You know, for example, you sit in a car waiting on somebody, or in bed at night trying to sleep, and the wife's zonked out next to you, just want something quick to listen to. So, first up, I think the way the podcast catch thing that I use on Linux, alphabetical. So, All Gen Gamers podcast. That's basically, who's it? Pete Dorr, Happy Console Gamer, Games31, and some guy called Jason Heine. They do a podcast, pretty self-explanatory. They talk about games from all generations. You know, these guys are pretty big YouTubers, so you probably know who they are. Interesting show. Some of their viewpoints are a bit, especially they all seem to be geeking out over the 3DS right now, and I'm very highly dubious about how that is. Next one, Cadcast. cheapassgamer.com, GPD. Some people call him the internet's greatest sellout. That's because they're fucking jealous because the man makes money from the internet by sitting in his apartment over doing nothing all day. And that pisses people off. But he does a weekly podcast that's him, a guy called Wombat, who's a bit of a, I don't know, and Shipwreck, he seems to know about the games. Basically they talk about video game deals, new releases, and what GP's not done all week, which is kind of funny. Next one, we have one called the Digital Cowboys. It's a British podcast, weekly, again gaming, various subjects. Usually they have a lot of guests on. In fact, they have had celebrity guests on. In fact, they had Dominic Diamond on, which is how I first got into him. And Dominic Diamond talks quite frankly about how he smashed it with head on coke when he was doing Games Master. If you're in the UK and a certain age and you're into video games, you watched Games Master, so you would like this episode. So Google Digital Cowboys. Dominic Diamond. Even if you just listen to that episode, it's worth listening to. Very good one. Next one I've got is Newsreel, I've already talked about. Next one was is Passenger Seat Radio. This is Shane R. Monroe. He's formerly of Retro Gaming Radio. That's a podcast that no longer exists. He stopped doing that. and there's basically where he records himself on the way to or from work and just talks about anything that pops in his head. I like the retro gaming radio show, so I kind of listen to Shane for that. It's pretty good. Sometimes his views are a bit sexist, a bit racist, but good show. Talks about his life, his kid running away, shit like that. You know, good stuff. The next one, I can't even effing read it. But actually, I'm having a problem. Oh yes, this is one I used to really like, and I've kind of gone off. Side scrollers on ScrewAttack.com. ScrewAttack.com. In fact, just go to ScrewAttack.com. It's a gaming site. They put something new up every day. They've got a weekly podcast called Side Scrollers. They'll beat games and stuff, and kind of gone off it recently. It seems to be more, I don't know, off the boil. It's not as good as it used to be. Seems like they're doing it more of a chore rather than an enjoyment. And of course now the site's been commercialised. I kind of stay away from podcasts, big podcasts like the Giant Bombcast or One Up Yours or whatever. You know, big gaming podcasts. I kind of stay away from them because a lot of times their opinions are bought, shall we say. Next on the list, this is a good one. It's another British one. World 1, Stage 1. It started a few years ago and then stopped, and it started again. It seems to be going pretty much semi-regular. There's three hosts. Well, there's four now actually, but there seems to be three of them on at the time. Simon, Troy, and Jack, and there's another guy that joins in every so often. And like Simon's girlfriend's been on a couple of times. Basically, they pick a game or a series and they talk about that for about an hour. Last one was about the Orange Box, so you got Portal, TF2, like 2 episodes, whatever's on the Orange Box. Previous that, I've done like the Chaos Engine, they've done Civilization. Very good podcast, especially if it's the episode something you're really interested in, so they focus on that and they talk about their experiences, and they're real gamers, you know, they buy games. Yeah, I recommend that one. I'd recommend everyone on this list, because I still listen to them. Next, we have a Retro Gaming Roundup. This is a monthly podcast, 3 hosts. Scott Schreiber, an American guy, works in the aerospace industry, puts satellites in orbit. He talks about hardware. There's SoCal Mike. He runs, well, he's a salesman essentially, but he runs GameGavel.com and Big Game Hunter. And there's what's his name? UK Mike, Minor 49 on a few of the forums. The podcast can be as long as 6 hours long. It only comes out once a month. Damn good podcast. Sometimes you have to skip whole sections, but yeah, I would recommend you check that one out. A couple of newer ones I've started listening to. Queens of the Pwn Age. That's a YouTube channel. 4 people. Well, it used to be 4 people from Glasgow review video games, so Scottish voices, which I like to hear. People actually buy games, which I like even more, because their opinions are not bought. They buy the games, and if they think the game's shit, they'll tell you it's shit, not because of the opinions being bought. So they've just merged with some other guys, so there's now a Queens of the Pwn Age podcast. I've only listened to a couple of episodes, and I'm still a bit, because it's different guys that do it, and they seem to be students, so sometimes they get sort of sidetracked and talk about, you know, stuff they've done with their friends rather than the games, and it's a bit, well, I don't know who your friend Heather is, so I don't know the story, so that's okay. I used to listen to Retronauts. I think that's just started back up. Again, that's a bigger podcast, famous one. Look it up, just Google it. There are a couple of others that the names escape me right now that I used to really enjoy, but are no longer on. In fact, the sites no longer exist. I mean, like the Pirate Pimps, when I talked about that, no longer exists as far as I can tell. I searched and there's zero information on them. I used to listen to another one called The Prototype, that was on the GameHeroes.com. The Game Heroes was started by a guy who left the ScrewAttack site. Well, in fact, one of the founders who left under a bit of a cloud, and he started up his own site, and he used, well, I believe they still do have a podcast called The Prototype, but it seems to be no longer an audio form, it's more of a video thing, and I'm not a big fan of video podcasts. They seem more produced, and I like the audio aspects and just listen to it in bed or in the car or on the go, just throw in your earphones. But yeah, I highly recommend podcasts. That's just my list. I mean, there's podcasts about everything. There's dozens of WoW ones, there's space ones, celebrity ones, whatever you want. Just go on the internet and just search podcasts, whatever topic you're interested in. Go listen to podcasts. They're great. Okay guys, thanks for listening to my 10 and a bit minutes of rambling about how great podcasts are and the ones I listen to. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.